The void was silent, yet it trembled. Above the desolate world of Varos Prime, an Imperial listening outpost floated in orbit, its ancient auger arrays scanning the abyss. For weeks they had reported disturbances, a growing distortion, a ripple that defied all known patterns of warp travel. Now the distortion had become a wound. The stars shuddered as a single point of darkness widened, folding upon itself. Lights across the station flickered and died, alarms blaring as terrified tech adepts prayed to the machine god. The void tore open in a storm of howling madness, spilling colors that no mortal eye was meant to see. The rupture expanded into a vast gaping maw, and from it poured a shriek that was not sound but thought, a psychic scream that clawed at the minds of every living thing on the station. Crewmen dropped to their knees, blood streaming from their noses and ears. Servo skulls spun wildly before crashing to the deck. The oldest of the tech priests whispered half-forgotten catechisms, his mechanical voice trembling. "Emperor, preserve us, a warp rift, a wound in reality." From the heart of that wound, shapes began to emerge. Tendrils of raw energy lashed out like serpents, rending the void itself. The air inside the station grew heavy, choking with the stench of ozone and burned incense as the Geller field flickered under the impossible strain. Through the viewport, a shadow took form. At first it was mistaken for wreckage, a chunk of debris hurled from the warp, but as it tumbled forward its outline became clear, a humanoid figure, massive and broad-shouldered, wreathed in crackling light. The figure spun once, twice before slamming into the atmosphere of Varos Prime below. The impact was a flash of white fire, a thunderclap that rolled across the surface like the wrath of a god. On the planet's surface, the people of Varos Prime cowered in the ruins of their hive cities. The world had been dying for centuries, bled dry by war and neglect. Its skies were a permanent shroud of ash, its streets crawling with starving masses and the ever-present boots of the Imperial Guard. When the sky split open, thousands dropped to their knees, convinced the Emperor himself had descended or that the ruinous powers had come to claim them. The crash site lay in the outskirts of a manufactorum district, where gutted factories lay silent beneath rusted spires. Imperial guardsmen of the 72nd Varos Regiment marched cautiously through the debris, their lasguns at the red. The air shimmered with heat as they approached the smoking crater. "Emperor's throne," one of them whispered, his voice barely audible over the hiss of cooling metal. At the center of the crater lay a figure unlike any they had seen. His body was half buried in molten earth, his flesh scorched but not destroyed. His frame was immense, muscle layered upon muscle, yet there was no power armor or ceramite plating, only a torn, charred garment clinging to his skin. 3 gleaming claws jutted from each hand, their metal surfaces steaming as they retracted with a faint, menacing click. The sergeant stepped forward, his hands shaking. "By the throne, mutant," he spat, though there was uncertainty in his tone. "Secure it before it wakes." Chains were brought, blessed by the local priest and smeared with sacred oils. The guardsman moved in, trying to bind the creature's limbs. It stirred, a guttural growl rumbled from deep within its chest, low and primal, the sound of a beast warning intruders away. The nearest soldier froze, terror rooting him to the spot. Then its eyes opened. Feral golden light blazed in the ash-choked gloom. The creature surged upward with terrifying speed, scattering men like dolls. A single swing of its clawed hand ripped through flak armor and bone. The screams of the dying filled the crater as lasfire erupted in a panicked storm. But it did not flee. It stood its ground, snarling, its wounds knitting before the soldiers' horrified eyes. For every shot that struck home, the flesh sealed, blood hissing as it evaporated on his skin. The men broke ranks, some fleeing, others firing blindly, until a single voice cut through the chaos. "Hold, by his will, hold." A figure in black storm coat and wide-brimmed hat strode into view, his rosette gleaming in the firelight. The Inquisitor raised his bolt pistol, his voice cold and commanding. "Cease fire. This is no mere mutant. This is something far more dangerous." The creature, Logan, staggered slightly, his mind reeling. He understood none of their words, only the hostility radiating from every direction. His world was gone, replaced by this nightmare of smoke and metal, these strangers shouting in a tongue he barely grasped. The rage boiled within him, barely restrained, a tidal wave held back by the thinnest of walls. The Inquisitor stepped closer, studying him with eyes as sharp as blades. "Restrain him," he ordered, voice like iron. Alive, chains clicked. Dozens of guardsmen surged forward, this time with heavy shock nets and electro-mauls blessed by the Mechanicus. Logan fought like a cornered animal, his claws flashing silver in the firelight, but the sheer numbers overwhelmed even his strength. A surge of electricity ripped through his body, forcing his muscles to seize. His roar shook the very walls as he finally collapsed under the weight of countless restraints. As he fell, his vision blurred. Above him, the sky was no longer a simple void, it pulsed with malevolent light. For just an instant he saw shapes moving within the tier in the heavens. Vast, monstrous silhouettes writhed and twisted, their whispers slithering into his mind. A single phrase echoed in a language older than stars, a promise of blood and ruin. The Inquisitor looked up as well, his face pale beneath his hat. He spoke a single word, heavy with dread. Chaos. The tear in the sky widened, spilling more unholy light upon the dying world. Whatever had brought this stranger here was only the beginning. The true horror had yet to emerge. Pain was the first thing Logan felt. It seared through his body like molten iron, every nerve screaming. He sucked in a ragged breath, the air thick with ash and the acrid tang of burnt metal. His vision swam, colors blurring into one another, until they finally sharpened into the outline of his surroundings. Ruin stretched in every direction, towering spires reduced to skeletal husks, streets cracked and blackened as though the world itself had been scorched by some ancient wrath. He pushed himself upright, chains rattling against his wrists and ankles. The metal was strange, heavier than anything he had encountered before, etched with symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. His muscles tensed instinctively, ready to tear free, but when he pulled, an unnatural resistance rippled through the bindings. It wasn't just metal, it was something deeper, something that clawed at his mind with whispers he couldn't quite understand. The memory of his arrival was fragmented. He remembered a flash of impossible light, a sensation of falling through fire and ice, and then, impact. Whatever had brought him here, it hadn't been natural. Logan's senses, honed through countless battles, told him one thing for certain: this place was hostile. Around him, a ring of armored soldiers kept their distance. Their armor was worn and soot-stained, their visors glowing a dull red. Each held a strange, boxy rifle that thrummed with barely contained energy. Behind them stood a man draped in black, his wide-brimmed hat casting his face into shadow. The scent rolling off him was strange, incense, blood, and something metallic like old gunpowder. Logan didn't know the man's language, but the tone of his voice was unmistakable. "Command." The black-coated figure spoke, gesturing sharply. At his signal, two soldiers advanced with hooked poles, jabbing at Logan's chains to test his restraint. Logan snarled, the sound low and feral. The soldiers hesitated. He caught their scent, fear, sweat, the tang of adrenaline. They didn't understand what he was, but they knew he was dangerous. The leader stepped closer, his gaze piercing. His voice was calm, cold, and filled with authority. Logan couldn't make out the words, but he understood the intent. Questions, demands, threats. Logan spat at his feet, a universal answer. The man's expression hardened. He gestured again, and the soldiers struck. Electricity coursed through Logan's body, forcing his muscles to seize. His roar echoed through the ruined district, rattling broken walls and scattering the carrion birds that had gathered overhead. When the current ceased, he collapsed to one knee, breathing heavily but not broken. The leader studied him with the detached curiosity of a predator, evaluating another predator. Then he crouched, speaking softly, almost gently. There was a strange cadence to his words, a rhythm that felt ritualistic. Logan's ears twitched. He didn't know the language, but he understood the tone. Persuasion now, where force had failed. "Where am I?" Logan growled through gritted teeth. His voice was hoarse, guttural. The soldiers flinched. The leader's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Logan might not understand them, but they clearly understood him, or at least, they understood enough. The leader barked an order, and one of the soldiers produced a small device. It hummed, projecting a thin beam of pale light between them. Logan felt a strange vibration in his skull, like someone rifling through his memories. The leader spoke again, his words now stilted, mechanical as though filtered through the device. "Identify. Origin. Speak." Logan's lip curled. "Name's Logan. Don't know how I got here. Don't care who you are. But you and me, we're gonna have a problem if you don't cut me loose." The translation came through in a distorted echo. The soldiers shifted nervously, murmuring prayers under their breath. The leader, an inquisitor, though Logan didn't know the word, remained perfectly still. His expression didn't change, but the tension in the air grew heavier. Before anyone could speak again, a low, distant rumble rolled across the ruins. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The soldiers froze, weapons raised, scanning the horizon. Logan sniffed the air and caught it instantly. A stench so foul it made his stomach churn. Rot, blood, and something far worse. Something unnatural. Shapes emerged from the smog ahead. Massive figures in jagged, blackened armor, their outlines inhuman. Their eyes glowed with baleful light, and their weapons were colossal, belching gouts of smoke and fire. The sight of them sent the soldiers into disciplined chaos, forming ranks and shouting litanies of courage. Logan needed no translation to know what they were saying. Whatever was coming, they feared it. The leader drew a weapon, unlike any Logan had ever seen. It resembled a pistol, but its barrel was wide and ornate, its surface covered in holy symbols etched into the metal. He aimed it toward the approaching shadows, shouting orders that rang with iron certainty. The first blast of enemy fire struck like a thunderclap. A soldier's head vanished in a spray of mist and shattered armor. Screams erupted as the hulking warriors advanced, their steps shaking the ground. Logan's chains tightened painfully, reacting to his rising rage. He growled deep in his throat, muscles bulging as he strained against the bindings. The black-coated leader spared him a single glance, hesitant, calculating, and then gave a curt nod to the soldiers guarding him. The chains loosened slightly, just enough for Logan to move. He didn't wait for permission. With a roar that split the sky, Logan lunged forward, claws unsheathing with a metallic snip. He hit the nearest attacker like a thunderbolt, tearing through corrupted armor and flesh in a single devastating strike. Blood hissed as it splattered on the ground, thick and dark as tar. The soldiers stared in stunned silence as Logan turned to face the next foe, his face a mask of fury. The black-coated man's lips curved into a thin, cold smile. Perhaps this creature was not a curse after all. Perhaps for now it was a weapon. Above them, the tear in the sky pulsed and widened, and something vast stirred within the darkness. The battlefield stank of charred flesh and burned promethium. Smoke coiled through the broken Manufactorum district as the last echoes of gunfire faded into a tense, unnatural silence. Bodies lay scattered among the rubble, some still twitching, others little more than shattered armor and torn meat. Logan stood at the center of it all, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his claws in thick, dark rivulets. His breath steamed in the cold, tainted air, mingling with the acrid fog of battle. The surviving Imperial soldiers stared at him as if he were some living nightmare. Their visors glimmered faintly, hiding their eyes, but the stench of their fear was unmistakable to Logan's sharpened senses. He caught every heartbeat, every tremor of their muscles, every whispered prayer to a god he did not know. They hadn't expected to live through this fight, and they certainly hadn't expected to see a beast tear apart foes they themselves could barely wound. The man in black stepped forward, boots crunching on broken masonry. The wide brim of his hat cast deep shadows across his gaunt face, but his voice carried clearly in the still air.
Logan didn't understand most of the words, but he caught the sharp edge of authority in every syllable. The man wasn't asking questions now, he was giving orders. Soldiers moved quickly at his command, forming a rough perimeter and dragging away the wounded, while others approached Logan with chains and heavy manacles etched in strange angular symbols. Logan snarled and flexed his claws, the metallic snick echoing like a death knell. The soldiers froze for a heartbeat, unsure. His body was battered, his skin torn and burned from bolter blasts, yet already his wounds were closing, pink flesh knitting before their wide eyes. That unnatural regeneration terrified them almost as much as the enemy they had just faced. "Back off," Logan growled, his voice ragged but strong. The man in black raised one hand and barked a command. The soldiers surged forward in unison, shock nets crackling with caged lightning. Logan fought like a cornered wolf, swiping with claws that cut through steel and bone alike. 2 men fell before they even screamed, their bodies ruined, but the nets struck home, wrapping around his limbs and torso, delivering a surge of electricity that made his muscles spasm violently. His roar rattled the crumbling spires, a sound more beast than man. He fell to one knee, snarling, every nerve on fire. The soldiers piled on, forcing the heavy manacles over his wrists and ankles. As the cold metal locked into place, Logan felt something far worse than physical restraint. A pressure bloomed in his skull, suffocating, oppressive. It wasn't just the weight of chains, it was a presence whispering in a language older than words, filling his mind with fragments of prayers and threats. The runes etched into the bindings glowed faintly, their light sinking into his skin like poison. The man in black crouched before him, close enough that Logan could smell him beneath the layers of incense and smoke. His eyes were sharp and calculating, like a hawk studying prey. He spoke slowly now, his voice clipped and deliberate. The translation device hissed, spitting out a broken echo of the words. "You will come. You will answer." Logan spat blood at his boots, his own voice, a guttural snarl. "Go to hell." The man's expression didn't change, but the soldiers shifted nervously. One muttered a prayer beneath his breath, clutching a pendant shaped like a stylized skull. Logan caught the words, "Emperor, protect us," though he had no context for their meaning. It was clear, though, that these people worshipped something with a fanaticism that bordered on madness. The leader rose, his cloak swirling. "Bind tighter," he ordered, his tone icy. The soldiers obeyed, layering the chains, until Logan could barely move his arms.
When he tried to extend his claws, the runes burned against his skin, sending waves of agony through his body. It was unlike anything he had ever faced before, a weapon not of technology but of belief. As they marched him through the ruins, Logan's mind sharpened, his instincts piecing together fragments of what he had seen. The enemy warriors, the ones in blackened armor, were unlike anything he'd encountered. They were too big, too fast, too strong, their weapons devastating. They weren't just soldiers, they were something more, something wrong. Even their scent had been twisted, reeking of corruption and rot, as though their very flesh rebelled against nature itself. The streets were lined with terrified civilians, ragged and starved, who fell to their knees as the procession passed. They reached out to touch the black-coated leader's boots, murmuring prayers of devotion, while others hurled curses and stones at Logan. He caught glimpses of their faces, hollow eyes, skin covered in ritual scars, mouths muttering the same name over and over. Emperor. The weight of their hatred pressed on him as heavily as the chains. To them he was a monster, a thing to be feared and destroyed. For once Logan wasn't sure they were wrong. The march ended at a towering structure of stone and iron, its spires stabbing into the ash-filled sky. Gigantic statues loomed overhead, each depicting armored warriors with wings of fire and swords raised high. The doors were massive slabs of metal, etched with the same symbols that burned on Logan's chains. Inside, the air was thick with incense and smoke. Candles flickered in endless rows, their flames casting dancing shadows across the wall. Ranks of robed priests chanted in unison, their voices a low, droning hum that vibrated in Logan's bones. At the far end of the hall stood a throne-like chair, upon which the man in black sat as though it had always been his by right. Logan was forced to his knees, his head snapped up, defiance blazing in his golden eyes. The leader leaned forward, his voice soft and deadly. "You will serve, or you will burn." Logan bared his teeth, his answer a growl that carried across the chamber. "You'll have to kill me first." The leader smiled faintly, as if amused. "Perhaps," he said, "but even the strongest beast can be broken." As he spoke, the ground trembled. A distant guttural horn sounded from beyond the city walls. Logan's ears twitched. The enemy was coming again, and this time they were bringing war. The deep guttural horn echoed again, closer this time, rolling through the great cathedral like the growl of some ancient beast. The chanting of the priests faltered. The soldiers stiffened, exchanging tense glances as their hands gripped weapons. Even the black-coated leader paused, his expression unreadable as he listened to the sound vibrating through the stone wall. Logan's sharp senses caught it before the others did. The stench of war carried on the wind. It was stronger now, acrid and corrupt, filled with the same foulness he had smelled on the warriors in blackened armor. His lips peeled back in a snarl. Whatever was coming, it wasn't human. The leader rose from his throne with a sweep of his cloak, his voice cutting through the rising panic like a blade. Orders snapped through the chamber, and the soldiers moved with sudden drilled precision. The priests fell to their knees, clutching their icons and whispering frantic prayers to their emperor. Logan's chains were yanked as two guards hauled him upright. He strained against the runes, their glow searing into his skin, every instinct screaming to break free and fight. The memory of the earlier battle burned in his mind, the hulking enemies, their inhuman speed and strength. If they were back, this place would be drenched in blood before dawn. The leader's cold gaze fell on Logan. "Release him," he commanded. The soldiers froze, uncertain they had heard correctly. "My Lord Inquisitor," one began, but the leader silenced him with a single raised hand. "You saw what he did," the Inquisitor said, his tone like iron. "The foe bleeds before his claws. While he breathes, he fights, and while he fights, he serves." Reluctantly, the soldiers obeyed. The round manacles were unlocked one by one. The instant they fell away, Logan surged to his feet, rolling his shoulders with a guttural growl. The burns from the runes faded as his healing factor kicked in, leaving his skin unmarked, but his anger sharp and raw. His claws extended with a metallic snap, gleaming in the candlelight. The Inquisitor regarded him with a predator's calm. "Fight," he said, his voice carrying across the hall. "Prove you are not the enemy we fear you to be." Logan didn't bother answering. The smell of corruption was growing thicker by the second. His body moved on instinct, muscles coiling as he stalked toward the cathedral doors. The first explosion shattered the night as the massive iron doors buckled inward, torn apart by a blast of unholy energy. Screams erupted as civilians scattered. The air filled with a haze of burning incense and blood. As the Chaos Warriors stormed inside, they were worse up close. Each warrior stood a head taller than any man, their jagged armor adorned with blasphemous sigils and writhing mutations. Their bolters thundered, each shot tearing through stone pillars and bodies alike. A sister of battle fell with half her chest vaporized, her weapon clattering uselessly to the ground. Logan didn't think. He leapt forward with a roar, colliding with the first of the monstrous soldiers. His claws ripped through corrupted ceramite, tearing open the warrior's chest in a spray of black ichor. The smell of rot and burnt metal hit him like a wave. The warrior's scream was mechanical, a guttural sound warped by whatever had corrupted him. The other Chaos Marines turned on Logan instantly. Bolter, fire erupted, deafening in the enclosed space. Logan dove, rolled and sprang up again, weaving through the storm of rounds. Some hit him, tearing chunks of flesh away, but his healing factor closed the wounds almost as quickly as they opened. Pain became nothing but fuel for his fury. The Imperial soldiers rallied behind him. With Logan drawing the chaos fire, they found their courage and advanced in a disciplined line, las guns spitting crimson beams. The priests shouted litanies of faith, their voices cracking under the strain, while the sisters of battle unleashed cleansing bursts of flame from their holy Promethean weapons. The Inquisitor moved like a shadow among them, his bolt pistol firing with cold precision. Each shot punched through corrupted armor, exploding with righteous fury. His voice rose above the din, issuing orders, driving his forces forward even as the cathedral began to collapse around them. Logan was everywhere at once, a blur of claws and rage. He tore through one enemy after another, his feral roars mingling with the screams of the dying. Blood coated his arms up to the elbows, and still he fought on, unstoppable, relentless. One of the Chaos Warriors swung a massive, rune-covered blade, striking Logan across the torso. The force of the blow hurled him into a pillar, shattering the stone. For a heartbeat, the world spun. Then Logan rose, snarling, his wounds already sealing. He charged, ducking under the next swing, and drove both claws deep into the warrior's throat. The creature gurgled, clawing at him, before collapsing in a heap of broken armor and corrupted flesh. The tide began to turn. With each Chaos Warrior that fell, the Imperials pressed harder, their chants rising into a frenzied chorus. For the Emperor, for Holy Terror. Logan didn't care about their words. He fought for survival, for instinct, for the sheer animal need to destroy the threat before him. But as he ripped apart another foe, he caught the Inquisitor watching him. There was no fear in the man's eyes now, only calculation. When the last Chaos Marine fell, the cathedral was unrecognizable. Fires burned unchecked, smoke coiling toward the shattered ceiling, corpses littered the floor, human and inhuman alike. The survivors staggered, wounded and exhausted, their victory hollow and fragile. Logan stood, amidst the carnage, chest heaving, his claws dripping with blood. His golden eyes scanned the room, seeking the next threat. The Inquisitor approached slowly, boots splashing through pools of gore. He looked at Logan, then at the slain Chaos Warriors, and finally at the soldiers kneeling in prayer around him. "First blood," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the crackling flames. "Fought in the Emperor's name, though you do not yet know him." Logan tilted his head, confusion flickering through his feral anger. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. The Inquisitor's gaze hardened. This is only the beginning. Outside, the horns sounded again, farther away this time, but still echoing, promising that the war was far from over. The fires in the ruined cathedral smoldered, filling the vast chamber with choking smoke and the stench of charred flesh. Logan stood amid the wreckage, his body streaked with gore, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. Around him, the surviving soldiers knelt in prayer, voices hoarse and trembling as they intoned hymns to their distant god. Logan didn't understand their words, but he understood their fear. It hung in the air like a living thing, almost as tangible as the ash swirling underfoot. The Inquisitor walked slowly among the kneeling men, his black coat trailing through pools of blood. His face was unreadable, though his eyes were sharp and calculating. When he reached Logan, he studied him in silence for a long moment. Logan met his gaze without flinching, his claws still extended, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "You bleed, yet you do not fall," the translation device rasped, its mechanical voice hollow. "You heal as though touched by the machine god's miracles, or by something fouler." Logan didn't answer. He didn't need to. His very existence here was already proof that he was an anomaly, a thing this world couldn't explain. The battle had shown that clearly enough. The Inquisitor raised a hand, and two soldiers approached, carrying a strange relic between them. It was a metal circlet, etched with symbols similar to those that had burned on Logan's restraints. The sight of it made Logan's skin prickle with unease. "Hold him," the Inquisitor commanded. Logan's growl rumbled deep in his chest. He didn't trust this man, didn't trust any of them, but before he could react, the soldiers surged forward, pinning his arms. They were strong,
but not strong enough to overpower him. His muscles bunched as he prepared to break free. Then the relic touched his skin. Agony exploded through his mind. It wasn't physical pain, not in the way claws or bullets hurt. This was deeper, like fire searing his very soul. Images flooded his vision, in a torrent of madness. A sky raining blood, mountains made of bone, a throne of skulls, stretching to infinity. Voices screamed in 1,000 languages, some whispering promises, others roaring threats. Logan roared back, thrashing violently. The soldiers were flung aside like rag dolls, their bones snapping as they hit the floor. The relic fell from his head, clattering against the stone. Logan staggered back, clutching his skull as the visions burned behind his eyes. His claws lashed out at empty air, striking at enemies only he could see. The Inquisitor did not move. He simply watched, his expression grim, but fascinated, as though confirming a theory he had dreaded to be true. When the surge finally ebbed, Logan collapsed to one knee, panting. His body trembled, sweat and blood mingling on his skin. The visions faded, but the whispers remained soft, insidious, like the hiss of a serpent just behind his ear. The Inquisitor knelt beside him, his voice low. "The mark of the warp is upon you." The translation device spat the words in broken fragments. "You are touched, not corrupted, not yet, but marked. The enemy has seen you, beast, and they will not forget." Logan's head snapped up, his teeth bared. "What the hell did you do to me?" His voice was raw with fury. The device repeated his words, and the Inquisitor's mouth tightened into a thin line. "We revealed the truth," he said coldly. "When you came through the rift, you did not come alone. The warp knows you now. It will whisper to you. It will tempt you. If you are weak, it will claim you, as it has claimed countless others."
Logan spat on the ground. "I've fought demons before. Nothing's taking me without a fight." The Inquisitor's gaze was piercing. "This is no simple demon," he said. "This is the eternal hunger that devours all things. Even now you hear it, do you not? The voices that are not yours." Logan's hands tightened into fists. He didn't want to admit it, but the man was right. The whispers had started the moment the relic touched him, and they hadn't stopped, faint at first, like a memory at the edge of his mind, but growing louder with every heartbeat. Some urged him to kill, to rend and tear until nothing remained. Others promised freedom, power, even a way home. The voices were endless, a cacophony threatening to drown out his own thoughts. The Inquisitor rose, his cloak swirling behind him. "You are a weapon," he declared. "Whether you strike for us or for the ruinous powers depends on your will. I will bind you again, not for your safety but for ours." Logan snarled, his claws snapping out with a metallic ring. "You try chaining me again, and I'll gut you." The soldiers raised their weapons, tension crackling in the air like a live wire. The Inquisitor, however, merely smiled, cold, humorless. "Good," he said softly. "Defiance means you still belong to yourself." Before more could be said, a distant explosion rattled the walls. Dust rained from the cracked ceiling, and the remaining stained glass shattered inward. A scout burst through the doorway, blood streaking his face. His words tumbled out in panicked gasps. The translation device rendered them harsh and clipped. Enemy forces, advancing too many to count. The Inquisitor's expression darkened. He turned to Logan. "The Chaos Lord comes for you," he said. "He will not suffer another to bear the mark freely." Logan's golden eyes narrowed, the whispers in his head surging like a rising tide. He could feel something vast and hateful moving toward them, its presence pressing against his mind. "Let him come," Logan growled, his voice like a promise of violence. "I've got claws enough for him too." The Inquisitor's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer. Then he barked orders to his men. As they rushed to prepare defenses, Logan stood amidst the chaos, his heart pounding. The mark burned beneath his skin, a reminder that the war wasn't just around him now, it was inside him. And deep within the warp, something ancient stirred, whispering his name. The ruins of the cathedral smoldered behind them, its broken spires stabbing into a sky of ash and fire. Logan moved through the streets with the Imperial column, his sharp senses tracking every sound and scent. The city was a labyrinth of misery, its streets clogged with ragged civilians who stared with hollow eyes as the soldiers marched past. Children hid behind crumbling walls, clutching scraps of food or worn effigies of the Emperor. Logan's gaze lingered on them, his jaw tightening. These weren't warriors or zealots, they were survivors, clinging to life in a world that seemed determined to crush them. The stench of despair was thick, almost suffocating. Corpses lay piled in alleys, covered with thin sheets of rust-colored cloth. The living trudged past without looking, their faces etched with resignation. Logan had seen plenty of war zones before, but this was different. This wasn't just battle damage, this was systemic, a slow strangulation of an entire world. The Inquisitor rode at the head of the column, his black cloak billowing in the toxic wind. His voice rose now and then, sharp and commanding, issuing orders that sent squads of soldiers fanning out to secure intersections or purge suspected traitors. Logan noticed how the people cowered when the Inquisitor passed, falling to their knees in reverence or fear. To them he wasn't merely a man, he was the Emperor's will made flesh. At one checkpoint, Logan paused, his claws half extended without conscious thought. A group of civilians knelt in the mud while soldiers stood over them with weapons drawn. An elderly man begged in a trembling voice, but the translation device didn't bother rendering his words. It didn't need to. The meaning was clear enough. "What's going on here?" Logan growled, his voice low and dangerous. A nearby soldier flinched, startled that the outsider spoke. "Heretics," he spat, though his hands trembled. "Warp-tainted. They must be cleansed." Logan's golden eyes narrowed. The kneeling civilians looked terrified, not tainted. He caught no scent of corruption, only sweat and fear. "They're unarmed," he said, stepping forward. "You kill them. You're just butchers." The soldier stiffened, uncertain, then looked toward the Inquisitor. The black-clad figure didn't even glance back. "Purge them," he commanded coldly. Before Logan could react, the soldiers opened fire. The kneeling figures toppled backward, their blood soaking into the mud. The crowd that had gathered scattered in panic, screams rising into the choking air. Logan's hands trembled, his claws twitching. "What the hell was that for?" he roared, his voice echoing off the hollow buildings. The Inquisitor turned in his saddle, his expression calm, almost serene. "Mercy," he said simply. "Better they die quickly than serve the ruinous powers." Logan's claws snapped fully out with a metallic hiss. He took a step forward, murder flashing in his eyes. "You call that mercy? You didn't even give them a chance to fight back." The soldiers around him raised their weapons instantly, a dozen barrels pointed at his chest. Logan didn't flinch, though his muscles tensed like coiled springs. The Inquisitor's gaze was like cold steel. "This is the Imperium," he said, his voice carrying for all to hear. "Survival is obedience. Defiance is heresy. Heresy is death." Logan's breath came in sharp, furious bursts. He wanted to tear the man apart, to rip his smug calm to shreds. But he forced himself to stand still, his claws slowly retracting. He couldn't fight them all. Not here. Not now. The column moved on, leaving the bodies behind. As they passed deeper into the city, Logan saw more evidence of the Imperium's iron grip. Massive banners depicting the Emperor's stern visage hung from every tower. Loudspeakers blared constant hymns and proclamations, their harsh voices drowning out the cries of the starving. Patrols marched through the streets, dragging away anyone who faltered in their prayers or failed to bow quickly enough. Logan's mind churned. Back home, he'd seen corrupt regimes and warlords, but there had always been resistance, always some spark of rebellion. Here, there was nothing, just submission, beaten into the people over generations. It was a world ruled entirely by fear. The whispers in his head stirred, feeding off his anger. "See them, Logan. See what they do. They are no better than the monsters you fight." The voices slithered through his thoughts, tempting, persuasive. "Tear it down. Free them. All it takes is one strike." He clenched his fists, forcing the voices back into silence. They weren't his thoughts. They couldn't be. As dusk fell, the column reached a massive wall of black stone. Beyond it lay a vast labor camp, its sprawl of rusted machinery and half-collapsed structures stretching to the horizon. The air was thick with smoke from burning pyres. Logan caught the scent of oil, ash and death, all mixed together. Thousands of ragged workers toiled under the lash of overseers in heavy armor. They moved like machines, their faces blank, their bodies skeletal from starvation. Every few minutes, a shrill whistle cut through the din, signaling another shift change. Those who collapsed were dragged to the side and thrown into carts like refuse. Logan's stomach twisted. This isn't war," he muttered. "This is slavery." The translation device crackled, relaying his words. The Inquisitor didn't slow his horse. "It is the Imperium's way," he said without emotion. "Industry feeds war. War sustains the Imperium. The weak serve the strong, or they perish." Logan's hands trembled. Memories flashed in his mind. Other camps, other atrocities, faces he couldn't save. He had thought he'd left that kind of nightmare behind. But here, it was an entire world. One of the workers stumbled and fell too weak to rise. The overseer raised a whip, bringing it down with brutal force. Logan's body moved before his mind caught up. In a blur, he crossed the distance and caught the whip mid-swing. The overseer turned, startled, but Logan's claws were already out. With a single slash, he cut the weapon in two. The workers froze, their hollow eyes suddenly wide. The overseer backed away, shouting for help. Soldiers rushed forward, weapons raised, and the crowd scattered in terror. The Inquisitor appeared, his face a mask of cold fury. "Stand down," he commanded. Logan didn't move. His breath came in ragged snarls, his claws dripping with oil and blood. "You think this makes you strong?" he growled. "Beating the helpless, killing your own people. You're no better than the bastards we're fighting." The soldiers tightened their circle, their fear thick in the air. The Inquisitor dismounted, stepping close until he stood face to face with Logan. "You do not understand," he said, his voice like a razor. "Without order, there is only chaos. This is not cruelty. This is survival." Logan stared at him, chest heaving, then looked past him at the camp, at the endless lines of broken people. His claws retracted slowly, but his rage burned hotter than ever. He realized then that he wasn't just fighting monsters in black armor. He was trapped in a system built on blood and chains, and every victory he earned would feed it further. As night fell, the whispers returned, louder than before. "They are all enemies, Logan. You know what must be done." He closed his eyes, struggling to silence them, but deep down, a part of him wondered if they were right. Night blanketed the labor camp. The darkness here brought no peace. The air pulsed with tension, every shadow seeming to breathe with hidden menace. Logan stood atop a rusted watchtower, his keen senses scanning the horizon. The soldiers below moved in disciplined patterns, torches flickering as they patrolled the perimeter wall. The prisoners huddled in their pens, whispering broken prayers, their voices blending with the hiss of steam vents and the distant clang of machinery that never stopped. Logan's claws extended and retracted in restless rhythm. He couldn't sleep, not with the whispers gnawing at the edges of his mind. They had been growing louder since the battle in the cathedral, twisting his thoughts in ways he didn't like. Some urged him to tear down the Imperium's chains, to set the people free in a storm of blood and fire. Others whispered of strength beyond imagining, of surrendering to the tide and becoming something more than mortal. He snarled under his breath, shaking his head as if the motion could dislodge them. He wasn't anyone's pawn, not the Imperium's, and sure as hell not whatever demons were lurking in this warp. The Inquisitor kept talking about, but even as he denied it, a flicker of unease lingered in his chest. His healing factor couldn't mend whatever the mark had done to him. A faint tremor rippled through the ground. Logan froze, every muscle going taut, his nostrils flared. The stench of corruption hit him like a blow. Burned flesh, spoiled blood, and a strange metallic tang that made his teeth ache. It was the same foulness he had scented on the Chaos Warriors, but thicker, more potent, like rot concentrated into a living presence. Below, the soldiers began to shout. Alarm horns blared, echoing across the camp. Floodlights snapped on,
cutting through the darkness and revealing a shape moving in the distance. At first it was a shadow against the smoke, then a silhouette of impossible size. As it drew closer, details emerged, blackened armor spiked with jagged bone, banners of flayed skin streaming from its pauldrons, a massive chain axe slung across its back. The figure moved with a terrible inevitability, each step shaking the ground.
Around it swarmed lesser warriors, dozens of them, their armor warped and twisted by the corrupting touch of the warp. They howled praises to their darker gods as they surged toward the camp's walls. Logan dropped from the tower, landing in a crouch. His claws slid out with a sharp metallic snick. "He's here," he growled, though no one had asked. The Inquisitor appeared from the command tent, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. Even he seemed momentarily shaken by the sight of the approaching army, though his voice remained like iron. "The Warlord of Ruin," he said, the translation device spitting the title in clipped tones. "The one who commands these heretics. He comes for you, outsider." Logan bared his teeth. "Good, saves me the trouble of hunting him down." The Inquisitor's cold gaze lingered on him. "Do not underestimate him," he warned. "He has led 100 worlds into damnation. Every warrior you faced before was shaped by his hand. This is not merely a man. It is a vessel of the warp." Logan didn't respond. Words didn't matter. All that mattered was the enemy in front of him. The first wave hit the walls like a living battering ram. Explosions tore through the defenses as the lesser Chaos warriors scaled the ramparts, their jagged weapons flashing in the torchlight. Imperial soldiers met them with lasfire and bayonets, their battle cries mixing with the guttural chants of their foes. The night became a maelstrom of noise, screams, gunfire, the clash of metal on metal. Logan hurled himself into the fray. He tore through the enemy ranks with primal ferocity, his claws rending corrupted flesh and armor alike. Every strike was precise, every movement born of decades of battle. The Chaos warriors were strong, but Logan was relentless, a storm of muscle and rage that could not be stopped. And yet, even as he fought, he felt the Warlord's presence drawing closer. It pressed against his mind like a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. The whispers in his head screamed louder, exultant, urging him to give in, to embrace the bloodshed fully. Through the chaos, the Warlord finally emerged. He towered above the battlefield, his mutated form encased in monstrous armor that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. His helmet was shaped like a snarling beast, its maw dripping with glowing itch. In his hands he carried a weapon too massive for any normal man to wield, a chain axe whose teeth were made from the fangs of daemons. The Warlord's voice boomed across the camp, not merely sound but a psychic force that rattled Logan's bones. The words were alien, yet the meaning burned into his mind. Blood, rage, submission. The soldiers faltered, some clutching their heads, others breaking ranks in terror. Even the Inquisitor staggered, his teeth bared as he fought against the psychic assault. Logan snarled, planting his feet firmly, refusing to bow. The Warlord's gaze fell upon him. For a moment the battlefield seemed to fade. Logan saw visions, himself clad in blackened armor, his claws warped into grotesque talons, leading an army of twisted warriors beneath banners of crimson and bone. The image was intoxicating and revolting all at once. Logan roared, tearing himself free of the vision. "You want me?" he shouted, his voice raw. "Come and take me." The Warlord answered with laughter that shook the sky. Then he charged, each stride shaking the earth. Logan sprinted to meet him, the ground blurring beneath his feet. The impact of their clash was like a thunderstorm given form. Claws met daemon-forged steel, sparks and blood flying in every direction. Around them, the battle raged, but all eyes were drawn to the titanic struggle at the center. The Warlord was stronger, his strikes fueled by the raw power of the but Logan was faster, his instincts honed through countless battles. He darted in and out, slashing deep, always moving, yet even as he landed blows, he could feel something seeping into him through every strike, a dark energy trying to claim him. The Inquisitor shouted orders, trying to rally his forces. "Hold the line," he roared, "the beast must not fall to chaos."
Logan's vision blurred as the whispers reached a fever pitch. Kill him. Claim his throne. Ascend. They urged him on, seductive and insistent. With a final, defiant snarl, Logan drove his claws into the warlord's chest. Black ichor erupted, but the monster only laughed, grabbing Logan by the throat and lifting him into the air. The warlord's voice thundered through Logan's skull. You are mine. Logan's claws tightened, his rage surging like a wildfire. Not today, he spat through gritted teeth. The battlefield held its breath as they struggled, two predators locked in a contest that would decide not just the fight, but the fate of the world itself. The warlord's grip was like iron, crushing the breath from Logan's lungs. Dark energy coursed through the monstrous warrior's gauntlet, searing Logan's skin and flooding his mind with visions of slaughter and ruin. The battlefield blurred around him, dissolving into a storm of crimson banners and rivers of blood. He could almost hear the cheering of countless unseen voices, urging him to submit, to kneel, to take his place as the chosen of some dark, howling god. But Logan was no one's pawn.
With a guttural snarl, he brought his claws down in a savage arc, severing the warlord's hand at the wrist. The chain axe fell with a shuddering crash as Logan tumbled free, rolling across the blood-soaked ground. He came up in a crouch, chest heaving, golden eyes blazing through the haze of smoke and warp-light. The warlord bellowed, a sound so deep and unnatural it rattled the teeth of every soldier on the field. Black ichor gushed from the stump of his wrist, but even as Logan watched, the flesh writhed and twisted, beginning to knit itself back together. The sight filled him with a cold certainty. This creature wasn't merely alive, it was being sustained by something far worse than flesh and bone. Bolt of fire roared to life around them, breaking the moment. Chaos Marines advanced in disciplined lines, their weapons thundering. Explosive rounds tore through the ranks of Imperial soldiers, scattering bodies like rag doll. The defenders screamed their prayers and fought back desperately, lasguns blazing in crimson streaks, but their firepower was pitiful compared to the brutal storm unleashed by the traitors. Logan didn't hesitate. He hurled himself into the hail of gunfire, instincts guiding him through the chaos. Bolter rounds screamed past, some striking him with bone-breaking force. Flesh tore, blood sprayed, but his body healed even as the wounds opened. Pain became a distant echo, drowned beneath the roar of his own heartbeat. He hit the first Chaos Marine like a meteor, claws punching through corrupted ceramite as if it were paper. The warrior screamed as Logan ripped upward, bisecting him in a spray of gore and molten metal. Without pausing, Logan spun, tearing through another foe's arm before driving his knee into its chest, caving in the blackened armor. The Chaos Marines adjusted quickly, their tactics shifting. They spread out, bolters tracking Logan's movements with terrifying precision. A volley of explosive rounds detonated around him, throwing him into the dirt. He rolled just as another burst tore a crater where he'd been lying, shards of stone slicing his skin. Logan rose with a snarl and charged straight at them. Speed was his weapon now, speed and fury. He darted between incoming shots, closing the distance before the Chaos Marines could bring their full firepower to bear. His claws flashed silver in the dark, slicing through weapons, limbs and armor alike. But for every foe he killed, two more stepped forward. These weren't like the lesser cultists he'd slaughtered before. They were towering giants, each one a living engine of destruction. Their bolters boomed relentlessly, their guttural voices chanting praises to their gods, even as they fell beneath Logan's fury. The battle became a blur of motion and blood. Logan felt himself slipping deeper into the berserker state, his thoughts dissolving into pure instinct. There was no plan, no strategy, only the next strike, the next enemy, the next kill. The whispers in his head roared with approval, feeding his rage, urging him to abandon himself completely. Yes, they hissed. Feel it. You are not man. You are the storm, the claw, the death they cannot stop. Logan roared and struck down another Chaos Marine, his claws punching through the warrior's helm. The enemy's body convulsed before falling limp, its corrupted blood steaming on the cold ground. Through the smoke he caught sight of the warlord again. The massive figure had retrieved his chain axe and was wading through the battlefield, each swing sending Imperial soldiers flying like broken dolls. The ground trembled beneath his steps. Every time his weapon struck, The warp itself seemed to scream. The Inquisitor's voice rang out over the din, sharp and commanding. "Concentrate fire. Bring him down before he reaches the gate." Heavy weapons crews scrambled into position, their autocannons roaring to life. Shells slammed into the warlord's armor, detonating in bursts of fire and shrapnel. For a moment it seemed to stagger him, but then the smoke cleared and he kept coming, his laughter rising above the battlefield like a promise of doom.
Logan didn't wait for order. He broke into a sprint, weaving through enemy fire until he was within striking distance. He leapt, claws outstretched, aiming for the warlord's throat. The warlord turned with inhuman speed, swinging his chain axe. Logan twisted mid-air, narrowly avoiding the blade as it ripped past, its teeth shrieking. He landed hard, rolling to his feet just as the warlord's boot came down, narrowly missing his head. They circled each other, predator and monster. Bolter fire continued to rage around them, a storm of noise and death. But in that moment, the battle seemed to narrow to the space between them. The warlord spoke, his voice rumbling through the warp itself. "You fight well, little beast. Serve me, and I will make you eternal." Logan spat blood and lunged. "You talk too damn much." Their clash was titanic. Claws met diamond-forged steel again and again, sparks flying with every impact. Logan's strikes were blindingly fast, carving deep wounds into the warlord's armor, but each blow was answered by one of crushing strength. Logan's body took a beating, bones breaking and healing in rapid succession, his healing factor pushed to its absolute limit. The Chaos Marines tried to close in, bolters roaring, but Logan spun toward them with a savage snarl. He tore through 3 of them in a blur of motion, their weapons falling silent as their bodies crumpled. The Inquisitor seized the moment, rallying his soldiers. "Advance, drive them back." Imperial last fire surged in a coordinated wave, cutting down the disorganized chaos ranks. The battlefield began to shift, the tide turning ever so slightly, but Logan barely noticed. His world had narrowed to the warlord's looming form, to the thunder of their blows, to the taste of blood in his mouth. With a final burst of speed, Logan feinted left, then drove both sets of claws deep into the warlord's side. The monster roared, staggering, his chain axe dropping from his grip. Logan wrenched his claws free, and prepared to strike again, but the ground beneath them split open, a surge of raw warp energy exploding outward. The blast hurled them both apart, flinging Logan into a shattered wall. As he rose dazed and bleeding, he saw the warlord retreating into the smoke, his laughter echoing like a curse. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The battlefield reeked of rot and burnt metal. Smoke drifted in lazy, choking tendrils over the piles of dead, hiding their faces in shadow. Logan sat on the broken edge of a wall, his chest rising and falling in heavy breaths. Blood slicked his arms to the elbows, most of it not his own. His body was battered, bones cracked and reset dozens of times during the fight, but he was alive, barely. The Imperials around him moved like ghosts, their voices hushed and trembling. They collected their wounded with reverent care, while the dead were stacked in grim silence. Priests walked among them, sprinkling incense and chanting prayers to their emperor. The haunting rhythm echoed through the ruins, almost blending with the distant thunder of retreating chaos forces. Logan's golden eyes scanned the wreckage. The warlord was gone, but his presence lingered like a foul taste in the air. Logan had faced monsters before, but nothing like that thing. Every strike, every word had carried the weight of something beyond flesh and steel. He couldn't shake the vision it had forced into his mind, the image of himself as a warlord, leading armies beneath banners soaked in blood. The whispers returned, soft and seductive. "You felt it, didn't you? The power, the freedom, you could rule this world, Logan. No chains, no masters, only the strong standing atop the weak." He growled low in his throat, forcing the voices back. They didn't speak for him, they never would, but a part of him, small and dangerous, couldn't deny how right the vision had felt. The Inquisitor approached, his black coat tattered and scorched from the battle. His face was pale but composed, his eyes sharp and cold. "The warlord retreats," he said through the translator device's mechanical rasp. But his purpose was not conquest, it was collection. Logan frowned, his claws sliding out with a metallic snick. "Collection? You saying this was just a damn shopping trip?" The Inquisitor's mouth tightened. Every major assault by the forces of chaos feeds their war machines. They do not take prisoners as you understand the word. They harvest flesh, blood and souls. Tonight was not a battle. It was a tithe. Logan's gaze swept over the field of bodies, his nostrils flaring as he caught the sense of the fallen. There were gaps, entire squads missing from where they should have been. His muscles tense. You're telling me they took them? The Inquisitor nodded grimly. Taken to be offered in ritual sacrifice. Their deaths will empower the warlord's armies, strengthen his pact with the warp. If we do not act quickly, the next time he strikes, it will be with strength beyond imagining.
A cold fury burned through Logan's veins. Then we go after him, now. The Inquisitor's expression remained unchanged. We are too depleted. Our forces need rest, resupply, reinforcements. A direct pursuit would be suicide. Logan stepped closer, his claws glinting in the dim light. Those people don't have time for your logistics, bub. Every second we wait, more of them die. The soldiers nearby tensed, their hands hovering near their weapons, but the Inquisitor didn't flinch. This is not about saving individuals, he said, his tone like ice. This is about preserving the Imperium. If sacrificing 1,000 souls ensures the survival of 1 billion, then that is the price that must be paid. The words hit Logan like a physical blow, his claws extended fully, a snarl ripping from his throat. You cold-blooded son of a pop. Before he could finish, the ground trembled. A deep throbbing hum filled the air, rising in pitch until it became a painful shriek. Soldiers shouted in panic as crimson light bled through the cracks in the earth. Logan staggered, clutching his head as the whispers in his mind surged to a deafening roar. He saw flashes of alien symbols, rivers of screaming faces, a towering throne built entirely of skulls. His breath caught as he realized what it meant. They're doing it now, he gasped. The sacrifice, it's happening right now. The Inquisitor's eyes widened slightly, though his voice remained steady. Then the ritual site must be close, perhaps closer than we fear. A scream split the night. All heads turned toward the source. Beyond the ruins, a jagged rift had opened in the earth. From it poured figures clad in rusted armor, their bodies twisted by mutation. They dragged captives behind them, Imperial soldiers, civilians, even wounded Chaos warriors. All were bound and gagged, their eyes wide with terror. The Inquisitor barked orders, rallying his forces. Form lines. Hold them here. But Logan was already moving. He barreled through the crowd, ignoring shouts to stop. The sight of those captives, broken, helpless, about to be slaughtered, ignited something primal inside him. Memories surged unbidden. Weapon X, cages, experiments, the cold hands of scientists holding him down while he screamed. He wouldn't let it happen again. He slammed into the chaos line like a living weapon. His claws shredded chains, ropes and flesh in a blur of motion. The captives scrambled to safety as Logan carved a path through their captors, but for every foe he felled, more appeared. They surged around him, chanting in a guttural tongue. Logan's healing factor struggled to keep up as blades and claws ripped at his flesh. His vision blurred with pain and rage, the whispers rising to a crescendo. Give in, they hissed. Spill their blood, claim their power, and none will ever chain you again. Logan roared, slashing wildly. The ground beneath him began to glow with a sickly light, symbols etched in blood igniting one by one. The captives screamed as the ritual neared completion. The Inquisitor's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Logan, break the circle. Now. Logan's instincts seized on the command. He hurled himself toward the center of the glowing symbols, his claws sweeping in a wide arc. The ritual lines shattered, spraying blood and fire. A psychic scream erupted from the ground as the rift began to collapse. The Chaos warriors broke, fleeing into the night. Logan stood amidst the wreckage, his body shaking, his breath ragged. The whispers receded, but not completely. They lingered like a poison in his veins, a reminder of how close he had come to losing himself. Behind him the Inquisitor approached, his face unreadable. The tithe was interrupted, he said coldly. But the warlord will not forgive this insult. Logan turned slowly, his golden eyes blazing. Good, he growled. Let him come. The rift closed with a violent hiss, leaving only scorched earth and the stench of burned blood. Logan stood at its center, chest heaving, his claws dripping with gore. The ground beneath him still pulsed faintly, as if the world itself hadn't yet decided whether to seal the wound or let it fester. Around him, Imperial soldiers moved cautiously, their voices hushed, their gazes flicking between the ruined ritual site and the man-beast who had torn it apart. Some looked at him with awe, others with fear, most with both. The Inquisitor arrived last, striding through the settling smoke like a shadow made flesh. His cloak was torn, his face smudged with soot, but his presence was as commanding as ever. He studied the shattered runes and dead cultists in silence, before finally turning his cold gaze on Logan. "You disrupted the tithe," the translator rasped. "But this was only a fragment of what lies ahead. The warlord is preparing for something far greater." Logan wiped blood from his face with the back of his hand, his golden eyes narrowing. Then spit it out. "What's he planning?" Before the Inquisitor could answer, a shudder ran through the air, like a silent scream too deep for mortal ears. The soldiers froze, hands clamping to their heads. Logan snarled, his senses exploding with raw impulse. The whispers in his mind surged, no longer faint suggestions but deafening roars. He staggered, clutching his temples as images flashed before his eyes. Cities burning, oceans of blood, a figure in black armor standing atop a mountain of skulls. A voice, vast and cruel, echoed through his thoughts. "All are mine. Even you, outsider." Logan roared back, his own voice tearing free in defiance. "Get out of my head." The vision shattered, leaving him on his knees panting. The soldiers stared at him in horror, some making the sign of the Aquila, others whispering prayers as they backed away. To them his reaction was proof of what they feared, that he was tainted by the same darkness they fought against. The Inquisitor knelt beside him, his expression unreadable. "The warp is reaching for you," he said, voice low. "It seeks to claim you fully." Logan growled, shaking his head. "I've fought my whole life to stay in control. Ain't nothing in this hellhole that's gonna take that from me." The Inquisitor's gaze sharpened. "But understand this. The warp is not merely a place. It is thought, emotion, nightmare given form. It feeds on rage, fear, desire. Every battle you fight makes you stronger, but also makes it stronger within you." Logan's claws slid out with a sharp snap. "So what you're saying, if I get mad enough, I'll turn into one of them?" The Inquisitor didn't flinch. "If you let it consume you, yes. The warlord knows this. He struck at you directly through the tithe ritual. He wants you, Logan, not just dead, but remade as his champion." The idea twisted Logan's gut. He had seen the warlord's army, the way their bodies had been warped and broken, their souls snuffed out. The vision of himself leading such creatures had been more terrifying than any nightmare he'd ever endured. "Over my dead body," he spat. "Exactly," the Inquisitor replied coldly, "and if you fall, I will ensure that death myself." Logan bared his teeth. "You try it, bub, and you'll find out just how hard I am to kill." Before the confrontation could escalate, a runner stumbled into the clearing, his face pale, his armor spattered with blood. He dropped to one knee before the Inquisitor, gasping out his report. The translator device struggled to keep up, spitting out broken phrases. "Astropath, message, warp breach expanding, entire sector destabilizing." The Inquisitor's face darkened. "Show me." They followed the runner to a field command post, where a pale, emaciated figure sat bound to a throne of machinery. The astropath's empty eye sockets wept blood as he rocked back and forth, chanting in a voice that was not entirely his own. Around him, servo skulls hovered, recording every word. The soldiers parted in silence as the Inquisitor approached. "Speak," he commanded. Astropath's head snapped up. Though blind, his gaze seemed to fix on Logan. His voice emerged as a guttural hiss, layered with something inhuman. "The beast walks in shadow. The enemy's will coils around him like a serpent. Should he fall, the galaxy burns. Should he resist, the galaxy still burns." Logan scowled. "That clears things right up." The astropath shuddered violently. "The warlord gathers his host at Black Spire Fortress. There, the veil will tear, and a tide of daemons will drown this world. He needs the marked one to open the way." His head lolled, and he began to scream, a high, keening sound that ended in a wet snap as his neck broke. The soldiers recoiled, Logan's fists clenched, his claws itching to tear something apart. "So, he wants me to play key to his door," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Fine, let's slam that door in his face." The Inquisitor studied him, weighing something unseen. Finally, he nodded. "We march on, Black Spy. But understand this, the closer we come to the warp breach, the stronger its pull will be. Your rage will not be your ally there. It will be your enemy." Logan's lip curled in a humorless smile. "Rage is all I've ever had." As preparations began, Logan drifted toward the edge of the camp, needing distance from the press of bodies and the stench of fear. He looked up at the sky, where the clouds churned in unnatural patterns, glowing faintly from within. He could feel the warp's presence now, a living, malevolent thing pressing down on the world. The whispers surged again, louder than before. "You are ours already. Why fight what you were born to be?" Logan dug his claws into his own palms, until blood dripped between his fingers. "Because I'm not like you," he snarled. "I fight because I choose to." Somewhere in the distance thunder rumbled, not from storms but from the marching of countless feet. The warlord's army was on the move, and the final confrontation loomed. Logan turned back toward the camp, his golden eyes burning with defiance. The shadow of the warp might reach of him, but he'd carve his own path through it, one claw strike at a time. The night before the march to Blackspire was unnaturally still. The air hung heavy, thick with the coppery scent of blood, and the acrid tang of promethium. The soldiers of the Imperial host moved about in grim silence, their preparations accompanied by the low hum of machinery and the muttered prayers of priests. Logan sat apart from them on the broken steps of a ruined shrine, sharpening his claws against a jagged piece of ceramite. The rasping sound echoed like the heartbeat of some caged predator. He could feel it, the pull of the warp like a clawed hand brushing the back of his mind. The closer they drew to the rift, the louder the whispers became. They no longer bothered to hide their intent. "You are the key," they hissed. "The door, the weapon. Tear down their walls. Claim your throne." Logan growled, forcing the voices aside, but they always returned, sly and patient. It was like trying to fight smoke with fists. He focused on the tactile reality of the moment, the bite of metal against his claws, the smell of burned incense drifting from the priest's rituals. Those small sensations kept him anchored when his own mind threatened to slip away. The sound of boots crunching on rubble drew his attention. The Inquisitor approached, his black coat swirling around him, his hat casting his face in shadow. Soldiers and priests alike stepped aside to give him passage, bowing their heads as though a fragment of the Emperor himself walked among them. Logan's lip curled at the display, but he didn't rise. The Inquisitor stopped a few feet away, his pale eyes studying Logan with the same cold calculation they always held. "You fight well," the translator device rasped, its voice hollow. "But strength alone will not decide what comes next." Logan didn't look up from his work. "If you came here to hand out compliments, you're wasting both our time." A faint smile ghosted across the Inquisitor's lips. "I came to make you understand the stakes. Blackspire is not merely a fortress, it is a wound in reality, a place where the warp bleeds freely into the material realm. The warlord will use you to tear it wide open. If he succeeds, this world and countless others will drown in deodorant fire." Logan finally raised his gaze, golden eyes narrowing. "And you think I'm just gonna roll over and let that happen?" The Inquisitor's expression didn't change. "I think you underestimate the warp's power. It will twist your rage, your instincts, even your memories, until you no longer know where you end and it begins. When the moment comes, you may not have the will to resist." Logan stood, towering over the man by a full head. His claws slid out with a metallic snick. "Then you'll just have to trust me." "No," the Inquisitor said, his voice as sharp as a blade. "I do not trust, I plan." He gestured, and two soldiers stepped forward carrying a heavy iron case. They opened it to reveal a strange device, an intricate collar of blackened metal etched with glowing runes. Its very presence made Logan's skin crawl.
You've got to be kidding me, Logan snarled. This will suppress the mark within you, the Inquisitor explained. If the Warlord attempts to control you through the warp, it will sever the connection. But understand this, it will also weaken you. Your healing factor, your strength, even your senses will be diminished. Logan's claws retracted slowly as he glared at the device. So your grand plan is to turn me into a cripple before throwing me at a walking nightmare? The Inquisitor's tone remained calm, almost soothing. Not a cripple, a controlled variable. I would rather face the Warlord with a slightly weaker ally than risk fighting a Chaos champion wearing your face. Logan laughed, though there was no humor in the sound. You got a real way with words, bub. The Inquisitor stepped closer, lowering his voice. You have seen what the Imperium is, Wolverine. You have seen our harshness, our cruelty. It disgusts you, as it disgusts me at times, but this war is not about morality. It is about survival. If the Warlord wins, there will be no Imperium, no civilians to protect, no stars left untainted, only the warp, forever. Logan stared at him, his jaw tightening. He wanted to argue, to tell this cold-eyed zealot that survival without freedom wasn't worth a damn, but he thought of the labor camps, the broken people, the way the Chaos Warriors had butchered captives for their foul rituals. Between two devils, at least one could be fought with claws and willpower. What's the catch? He asked finally. The Inquisitor's pale eyes gleamed. If you falter, if you begin to succumb to the warp's influence, I will end you, quickly, if possible, publicly, if necessary. The Imperium cannot afford the risk of you becoming a symbol for chaos. Logan stepped forward until they were nose to nose. You even think about putting me down, and you better make damn sure you do it right the first time. The Inquisitor didn't blink. Agree. For a long moment, they stood locked in silent challenge. Then Logan sighed, shoving his claws back into their sheaths. Fine. Strap the damn thing on me, but when this is over, I walk. No chains, no orders, no sermons. The Inquisitor inclined his head slightly. When this is over, if there is still a galaxy to walk in, you may go where you please. The soldiers hesitated as they fastened the device around Logan's neck. The runes flared to life, sending a sharp jolt through his body. He gritted his teeth, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him flinch. The voices in his head dimmed instantly, reduced to faint, distant echoes. For the first time in days, his mind was his own. The Inquisitor turned away, his cloak swirling. We march at dawn, he said. Black Spire awaits, and with it, the fate of this world. As the camp settled into uneasy silence, Logan sat alone, testing his diminished strength. He felt slower, weaker, but clearer too, like a blade newly honed. He looked toward the distant horizon, where the sky pulsed with sickly warp light, and muttered to himself. All right, bub, he growled under his breath. One last fight, then I'm done with all this. Above the horizon, lighting forked through the clouds, casting Black Spire's looming silhouette in stark relief. The final battle was coming, and there would be no turning back. Dawn broke like a wound in the sky, bleeding crimson light through the thick clouds that churned above the horizon. The silhouette of Black Spire Fortress loomed in the distance, a jagged crown of obsidian towers, rising from the poisoned earth. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, and the metallic tang of warp energy. Every breath felt like inhaling ash and rust. Logan marched at the front of the Imperial column, his steps silent, despite the heavy chainsaw thrum of tanks, and the pounding boots of thousands of soldiers behind him. The collar around his neck hummed faintly, its runes glowing with a cold, unnatural light. It dulled the incessant whispers in his mind, but not completely. They still lingered at the edges of his thoughts, like vultures circling a dying beast. Break the seal, tear it down. You were made for this, he growled under his breath, forcing them aside. Focus, one step at a time. The Inquisitor rode alongside on a command transport, his pale face impassive as he surveyed the advancing army. The priests marched just behind him, chanting litanies of faith, their voices rising above the dull thunder of artillery. They carried massive icons of the Emperor, their golden surfaces gleaming faintly even under the storm-choked sky. The sight seemed to steady the soldiers' nerves, though Logan noticed more than a few avoided looking directly at the fortress ahead, as if its very shape offended their souls. As they drew closer, the full scale of Black Spire became clear. The outer walls were impossibly high, forged of black stone streaked with veins of something that pulsed like living tissue. Baleful fires burned in its towers, casting a sickly glow over the battlefield. Logan's sharp eyes caught movement along the battlements, figures too massive to be human, armored silhouettes bristling with heavy weaponry. "Here we go," he muttered. The first salvo came without warning. The ground erupted in towering plumes of fire and shrapnel as Chaos artillery opened fire. Imperial tanks disintegrated in sprays of molten metal. Soldiers screamed as they were hurled through the air, their bodies breaking on the unforgiving earth. The Imperial reply was immediate. Earthshaker cannons thundered, filling the air with the deafening roar of retaliation. The sky darkened under a storm of missiles and shells. Logan crouched low, his instincts screaming as explosions tore apart the ground around him. The Inquisitor's voice rang out over the din, carried by vox amplifiers. "Forward, in the Emperor's name, take the walls." The tide of humanity surged ahead. Logan moved with them, a blur of motion, dodging falling debris and streams of tracer fire. He didn't need orders. His senses guided him through the chaos, always toward the greatest threat. The first wave of Chaos defenders descended from the walls like a plague. Mutated warriors dropped into the fray, their weapons screaming. Logan met them head-on, his claws flashing silver in the crimson light. He tore through flesh and armor with equal ease, each strike precise and brutal. Blood hissed as it hit the ground, thick and dark as tar. Around him, Imperial guardsmen fought desperately, their lasings blazing in disciplined volley. Sisters of battle advanced in tight formations, their flamers spewing holy promethium into the ranks of the heretics. The air became a choking miasma of smoke, blood and burning flesh. Logan's healing factor kept him moving even as blades and bullets tore into him. His collar dulled the warp's influence, but he could still feel it pressing against his mind, like a tide trying to drag him under. The closer he got to the fortress, the stronger it became. Whispers hissed in his ears, seductive and cruel. "Stop fighting. Let it flow. Become the beast they fear." He ignored them, focusing on the rhythm of battle. Strike, move, kill. A massive shadow fell over him. Logan looked up just in time to see a Chaos dreadnought crashing through the Imperial line. Its warped metal frame groaned as it swung, a massive claw crushing soldiers in its path. Its other arm belched streams of molten warp fire, incinerating everything it touched. Logan didn't hesitate. He sprinted up the shattered hull of a wrecked tank and launched himself at the machine's torso. His claws sank deep into the corrupted armor, tearing through wires and flesh alike. The dreadnought roared, thrashing wildly as Logan climbed higher, ripping and tearing with relentless fury. Finally, he drove both sets of claws deep into its core. The machine convulsed, then exploded in a burst of black fire, hurling Logan. He hit the ground hard, rolling to his feet just as the Inquisitor's transport surged past. The Inquisitor himself stood atop it, his bolt pistol barking as he cut down enemy champions with icy precision. "Breach the gates," he shouted. "Do not falter." Imperial tanks pushed forward, their dozer blades clearing paths through the corpses and rubble. A massive battering ram, shaped like a golden aquila, rumbled toward the fortress gates. Then the warlord appeared. He emerged from the gatehouse like a living nightmare, his towering form wreathed in crimson energy. His chain axe gleamed with fresh blood, its teeth spinning hungrily. Around him swarmed his chosen guard, Chaos Marines clad in Baroque armor, their helmets shaped into leering skulls and fanged maws. The battlefield seemed to pause, as if even the world itself held its breath. Logan felt the warp's presence surge, a crushing weight that nearly drove him to his knees. His collar flared painfully, barely holding the influence at bay. The warlord raised his weapon and roared, a sound that shook the sky. His army answered with a deafening chorus, their voices blending into a single wordless chant of hatred. The gates of Black Spire swung open, and the final wave poured forth. Logan charged. There was no plan, no strategy, just the need to reach the monster at the heart of it all. His claws gleamed as he cut down anyone in his path, leaving a trail of broken bodies in his wake. The Inquisitor's forces rallied behind him. Sisters of Battle unleashed cleansing flame, while guardsmen poured last fire into the oncoming horde. Titans of war strode forward, their guns leveling entire sections of the enemy ranks. Logan and the warlord met in the midst of the carnage. Their first clash was a thunderclap, claws against daemon-forged steel, sparks flying in the darkness. Around them, the battle reached a fever pitch, but neither warrior noticed. For them, the world had narrowed to a single savage truth. Only one would walk away from this field. As the walls of Black Spire began to crumble, the fate of the world hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of a blade. The world seemed to shatter around them, as Logan and the warlord collided again, their clash eclipsing the battle raging on every side. The fortress walls groaned and splintered beneath the weight of the siege, but neither warrior heard the cannons or the screams. Their entire beings were focused on one another, predator and monster locked in a contest that would decide the fate of this cursed world. The warlord's chain axe roared as it descended, teeth spinning fast enough to blur into a single streak of crimson light. Logan twisted aside, the weapon missing him by inches, the sheer force of its passage ripping a gouge through the ground where he had stood. He retaliated with a feral lunge, both sets of claws raking across the warlord's chest plate. Sparks flew, black ichor spraying into the air, but the creature barely staggered. The monster laughed, a booming, guttural sound that seemed to echo inside Logan's skull. "You bleed me, little beast, but you cannot kill what the gods have made eternal." Logan spat blood, his lips curling back in a snarl. "We'll see about that." The warlord surged forward, moving with impossible speed for something so massive. Logan barely ducked beneath a backhand swing that would have torn him in half. He rolled, came up under the monster's guard, and drove his claws into the exposed joints of its armor. The warlord bellowed, spinning and hurling him aside like a rag doll. Logan crashed through the corpse of a Chaos Marine, splintering corrupted bone before tumbling across the blood-soaked earth. Pain flared through his body, but his healing factor kicked in immediately. Bones snapped back into place, muscles knitting together even as he staggered to his feet. The collar at his neck flared brightly, keeping the warp's influence at bay, but barely. The closer he came to the warlord, the stronger the whispers became. "Strike him down, claim his throne, ascend. You are not prey, you are the predator. The Lord of Skulls could be you." Logan's vision blurred. For a heartbeat, he saw himself standing where the warlord now stood, clad in blackened armor, rivers of blood flowing at his feet. Behind him marched legions chanting his name. His claws had grown monstrous, fused with daemon metal. Power beyond imagining surged through his veins. "No," he roared, slashing the air to tear the vision apart. His golden eyes refocused on the real enemy, just in time to see the chain axe descending again. He crossed his claws to catch the blow. The impact drove him to his knees, the weapon's teeth gnashing inches from his face. Blood streamed down his arms as he held the strike, muscles trembling, tendons threatening to snap. The warlord leaned close, his voice a hideous whisper that reverberated through the warp itself. "You are mine, creature. You were forged for war. This galaxy is built on chains and slaughter. Join me, and I will show you freedom beyond the lies of the Imperium." Logan's teeth ground together. "I've had my fill of chains," he growled. With a surge of strength, he twisted aside and slashed upward, severing one of the daemon-forged weapon's handles. The chain axe screeched as its balance faltered, forcing the warlord to retreat a step. Around them, the battle raged in a storm of fire and scream. The Imperial line faltered under the relentless onslaught of chaos. Sisters of Battle fought in burning rows, their hymns cutting through the smoke as they unleashed torrents of flame. Guardsmen died by the hundreds, their bodies piling beneath the wall. Titans fired into the fortress, bringing down towers even as new hordes poured from the breach. The Inquisitor's voice rose above it all, commanding, unyielding, "Hold the line. The beast and the warlord must not fall to chaos." But Logan barely heard him. His world had narrowed to the warlord alone. The monster charged again, a living battering ram. Logan sidestepped, slicing through the straps securing its shoulder guard. The massive piece of armor fell away, exposing pale, mutated flesh beneath. Logan struck, his claws sinking deep into the exposed muscle. The warlord roared in fury and pain, grabbing Logan by the torso and slamming him into the ground hard enough to crater the earth. Logan's vision went white. The warlord raised his foot to crush him, but Logan rolled free, springing up with a savage uppercut that ripped open the monster's throat. Black ichor sprayed across Logan's face. The warlord stumbled but did not fall. Instead, he laughed, a sound like a funeral bell. "You think this ends with me, beast? My death is merely the first stone in the avalanche. Chaos will rise and your claws will carve the path for it." Logan roared, driving his claws into the warlord's chest. The armor cracked, splintering like bone. He ripped downward with all his strength, opening the monster from throat to gut. The warlord dropped to his knees, his eyes burning with warp fire, locked on Logan's. "You are the Lord of Skulls now," he rasped. "You will kill, in my name, whether you will it or not." Then the light went out of him. The massive form toppled forward, shaking the ground. For a heartbeat, silence fell. Even the raging battle seemed to pause, every soldier on both sides staring at the fallen warlord. Then the whispers erupted inside Logan's mind, louder than ever. They didn't plead now, they commanded. "Rise, rule, slaughter, become." Logan staggered back, clutching his head. His claws lashed out wildly, striking empty air. Visions flooded his mind, himself leading the Imperium's enemies, tearing apart planets, bathing entire star systems in blood. The power offered was intoxicating, its pull irresistible. The collar around his neck flared white hot, its runes searing into his flesh. The pain was blinding, but it snapped his mind back from the brink. With a guttural snarl, he fell to his knees, gasping, sweat and blood mingling on his skin. The Inquisitor appeared at his side, his bolt pistol drawn. "Do you control yourself?" he demanded, his voice a cold blade. Logan's head snapped up, his golden eyes blazing. "For now," he growled. The Inquisitor's finger hovered near the trigger, ready to end him if he faltered. Then he lowered the weapon slightly. "Then rise, Wolverine. The battle isn't over."
Logan forced himself to his feet. Around them, the Chaos Army broke and fled, their morale shattered with their leader's fall. Imperial soldiers surged forward, pressing the advantage. The fortress walls began to crumble completely, collapsing into clouds of dust and fire. Logan stood over the warlord's corpse, his claws dripping black ichor. The whispers had quieted, but he knew they would never be gone. He would carry them always. A scar etched into his very soul. As the Inquisitor gave orders to secure the fortress, Logan stared at the horizon, where the sky still churned with warp light. He had won, but victory felt hollow. Somewhere deep inside, a truth gnawed at him like a wolf at a bone. He had killed the warlord, but part of him feared the monster had been right. The fall of the warlord should have ended the battle. Chaos forces scattered in every direction, their guttural chants dissolving into screams of fear and rage. Imperial soldiers surged forward like a breaking tide, cutting them down as they fled. Victory cries mingled with the clang of steel and the dull thud of collapsing walls. Yet Logan stood motionless amid the carnage, staring at the warlord's corpse as if rooted to the spot. The black ichor clinging to his claws seemed to pulse, a sick rhythm that matched the pounding in his skull. The whispers returned, not as a chorus this time, but as a single clear voice. It was deep and smooth, commanding in its terrible calm. "You think you've won, little beast. You think the throne of skulls falls silent with one death. But chaos does not die. It only changes form. And you will be its next vessel." Logan snarled, shaking his head violently. "Get out of my head." His claws lashed out, striking the warlord's corpse in a wild frenzy, tearing it into unrecognizable chunks. But no matter how he shredded the body, the voice did not stop. The collar around his neck blazed with searing heat, trying to contain the warp's influence, but the energy was too strong now. The warlord's death had not broken the connection, it had transferred it. The mark burned beneath Logan's skin, his veins glowing faintly as if lit from within. He fell to one knee, gasping, every muscle trembling. The Inquisitor appeared beside him, his bolt pistol already drawn. His expression was as unreadable as ever, but his voice was edged with urgency. "Wolverine, Speak to me. Do you still control yourself? Logan's head snapped up, golden eyes blazing with feral light. For a heartbeat there was nothing human in his gaze. The Inquisitor's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, Logan surged to his feet with a roar that seemed to shake the very stones beneath them. The nearest Imperial soldiers stumbled back in terror. Logan's body convulsed as warp energy coursed through him, his muscles bulging, veins blackening beneath the skin. His claws extended fully, glowing faintly with a crimson sheen. The whispers were no longer whispers, they were commands, screamed directly into his mind. Kill, claim, ascend. He staggered, clutching his head, teeth bared in a grimace of pure agony. No, he snarled through gritted teeth. You don't own me. The Inquisitor barked orders. Soldiers scrambled to surround Logan, their weapons raised, but the Inquisitor held up a hand. Do not fire. If you strike him now, you will only hasten his fall. Logan's breathing came in ragged gasps. Memories flooded him, unbidden and merciless. Weapon X. The icy laboratories, the smell of antiseptic and blood. The voices of men who saw him as nothing but a tool. Then other memories layered over them. The fortress, the slaughter, the cries of the innocent beneath the heel of the Imperium. All of it blurred together, a storm of rage and pain that threatened to tear him apart. He roared again, and this time the sound was accompanied by a visible shockwave of warp energy. Imperial soldiers were hurled backward, their bodies slamming into broken walls. The ground split in jagged cracks beneath Logan's feet. The Inquisitor shouted something, but Logan couldn't hear the words. The world had dissolved into instinct. His vision tinted red, his mind consumed by a singular need to destroy everything and everyone. He launched himself at the nearest Chaos warriors, who still fought on the fringes of the battle, tearing through them with terrifying speed, claws ripped through ceramite and bone, each strike more savage than the last. The remaining Chaos Marines, already broken by the loss of their leader, fled in terror, but Logan didn't stop. He pursued them relentlessly, his movements a blur of violence. It no longer mattered who they were, Chaos, Imperial, it made no difference. Anyone in his path fell. The Inquisitor realized what was happening and shouted for the collar to be reinforced. Tech priests scrambled forward, chanting prayers as they attempted to strengthen the binding. Sparks burst from the device, runes flaring white-hot, but Logan tore free with a roar, the fragments scattering like brittle glass. Contain him, the Inquisitor commanded. Dozens of soldiers opened fire. Las beams and bolter rounds tore into Logan, but his healing factor outpaced the damage. The attacks only fueled his fury. He leapt into their midst, carving a bloody swath through their ranks. The battlefield, moments ago, a place of Imperial victory, descended into chaos once more. The Inquisitor gritted his teeth. His mind worked furiously, calculating, adapting. If Logan could not be calmed, he would have to be stopped, and quickly, but killing him outright risked fulfilling the very prophecy the astropath had spoken. Logan, lost to the berserker within, did not see the hesitation. He only saw enemies. His claws gleamed crimson in the strange light as he cut through another wave of foes. Each kill sent a rush of dark euphoria through him, the warp feeding his rage, amplifying it beyond mortal limit. Yes, the voice purred. See how they fall before you. No master, no leash, only the freedom of absolute power. Logan staggered, his breath ragged. For a split second, he saw himself clearly, saw the bodies around him, the Imperial soldiers who had fought beside him only hours ago. His claws were slick with their blood. The horror of it struck through the haze, cutting deep. No, he whispered, almost too softly to hear, then louder, with a roar of defiance. I'm not your damn weapon. He turned his fury inward. With a primal scream, he drove his claws into the ground, channeling every ounce of rage into himself rather than those around him. Warp energy surged through him, tearing at his flesh, threatening to rip him apart from the inside. The sky above Blackspire split with a crack of thunder as the fortress walls collapsed completely. Chaos warriors fled into the warp, their retreat frantic and disorganized. The Imperial forces fell back, stunned and bloody. At the center of it all, Logan knelt, his body steaming, his claws buried deep in the earth. The whispers were silent. For the first time since arriving in this cursed world, his mind was his own. The Inquisitor approached cautiously, his bolt pistol still raised. "Wolverine," he said, his voice softer now. "Are you yourself again?" Logan lifted his head slowly, his golden eyes burned with exhaustion, but also clarity. "For now," he rasped. The Inquisitor studied him for a long moment, then lowered his weapon, then rise. "The world still burns, but you have bought us the chance to save it." Logan pushed himself to his feet, staggering but unbroken. The beast within had been unleashed, but for now, it was caged again. Still, he knew it would never truly be gone. Somewhere deep inside, it waited, whispering, hungering, watching for the day it could strike again. The fires of Black Spire Fortress burned low, casting long, flickering shadows across the shattered battlefield. Smoke rose in lazy spirals, carrying with it the acrid stench of promethium, blood, and the faint, unearthly tang of the warp. Logan stood at the edge of the ruins, staring out across the smoldering remains of the Chaos host. The enemy was broken, their champions dead or fled, but victory felt hollow. Too many had died, and the cost of survival weighed heavily on every breath. Behind him, Imperial soldiers moved with mechanical efficiency, tending to the wounded, stacking the dead, and securing the battlefield. Their faces were masks of exhaustion and grim duty. Sisters of battle walked among them like living statues, their armor scorched but unyielding, their lips moving silently in prayer. No cheers rose, no songs of triumph were sung, even the priests were silent. This was not a victory to celebrate, only a reprieve from annihilation. The Inquisitor emerged from the haze, his black coat tattered and streaked with dried blood. He surveyed the ruins with cold detachment, his pale eyes seeming to measure every broken wall, every body. When he spoke, his voice carried with the same unshakable authority as before. "The breach is sealed. The warlord's death has severed this world from the worst of the warp's corruption. For now, Varos Prime endures." Logan didn't turn. His claws slid out with a metallic snikt, then retracted again just as quickly. The motion had become a reflex, a way to keep his mind grounded. "For now," he echoed bitterly, "until the next monster crawls out of that hole you people keep patching up with bodies." The Inquisitor's jaw tightened. "You speak as though there is another way. There is not. The Imperium survives because it must. The galaxy is not kind to dreamers, Wolverine." Logan finally turned to face him, his golden eyes burning. "Yeah, I've seen what your survival looks like. Camps full of starving people, priests preaching fear while soldiers gun down folks who just want to live. You call it survival, I call it another kind of hell." For a moment, they stood in silence, the crackling fires around them, the only sound. Then the Inquisitor spoke, softer now. "And yet, in this hell, you chose to fight beside us." Logan didn't answer. He looked past the Inquisitor, to the Imperial troops kneeling in prayer around the fallen. Their voices rose in unison, a low chant that sent a shiver down his spine. There was no joy in it, only the heavy weight of duty and despair. He wondered how many of them even understood why they fought, or if they simply obeyed because they didn't know any other way. The wind shifted, carrying with it a faint whisper. Logan's head snapped up, every muscle tense. It wasn't the guttural voices of chaos, nor the litanies of the Imperium. This whisper was softer, subtler, like the rustle of leaves in a dark forest. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You think this is over?" it murmured. "The warlord was but a servant. The true masters wait beyond the veil. You cannot escape them." Logan clenched his fists, his claws itching to strike. He glanced at the Inquisitor, but the man gave no sign of having heard the voice. That meant it was in Logan's head, or worse, in his soul. He turned away sharply. "I'm done here," he growled. "This fight, this world, it ain't mine." The Inquisitor stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Where will you go? There is no safe harbor beyond the Imperium's reach. The galaxy is full of enemies, who will see you as either a tool, or a threat. Likely both." Logan shrugged, his movements sharp and restless. "Ain't the first time, won't be the last." The Inquisitor's gaze hardened. "Then hear me, Wolverine. You are marked by the warp now. No matter where you flee, it will follow.
The voices you hear will never truly fade. If you ever falter, if you ever turn against humanity, I will hunt you down, personally. Logan smirked, though there was no humor in it. Get in line, bub, plenty of folks have tried. He turned and began walking toward the jagged horizon. The battlefield stretched behind him, like a graveyard of giants, the broken spires of Black Spire Fortress, silhouetted against a sickly dawn. Each step carried him farther from the Imperials, farther from the chains, and banners, and endless war. But with every step the whispers grew louder. Why leave? You could rule here, tear down their false idols, lead the strong against the weak. You have the strength, you have the will. Logan stopped abruptly, his claws snapping out. Shut up, he snarled. I ain't your damn pawn. The voices hissed with laughter, fading but not gone. From a distance, the Inquisitor watched him go. One of his aides approached cautiously. My lord, should we not detain him? He is dangerous. The Inquisitor's pale eyes never left Logan's retreating form. Dangerous, yes, but also necessary. Let him walk his path. If he returns to us, perhaps he will fight again. If he turns to chaos, his hand rested lightly on the grip of his pistol. Then I will do what must be done. Logan crested a rise and paused, looking back one last time. The Imperials were already fading into the smoky haze, their banners dim shapes against the ruins. For a moment he felt a pang of something he couldn't name. Not belonging, not loyalty, just the simple weight of having fought beside others, even if only for a little while. Then he turned his back on it all, and kept walking. The wind picked up, swirling ash and soot around him like a shroud. As he disappeared into the wasteland, the whispers stirred again, faint but persistent. You cannot run forever, Logan. The darkness is patient, and it always finds its own. Logan didn't answer. His claws slid out with a final metallic snick, a warning to the unseen things lurking beyond the horizon. Whatever came next, he'd meet it on his own terms, alone, unchained, and ready to fight. Behind him, Varus Prime smoldered in uneasy silence. The Imperium claimed victory, but the warp had not been defeated. In the vast, uncaring darkness of the galaxy, new threats stirred, and old ones waited to rise again. Logan walked on, a solitary figure framed against the dying light, his shadow stretching long and jagged across the broken earth. Somewhere in that shadow, the beast still lurked, waiting for the moment when it would be unleashed once more.